Thank you so much for joining today in the World is New Part 2, where we use the book The World is New from Joel Goldsmith, and we have some related tapes that go very well with the book, and we use that too. And so welcome to this part 2. We have so many chapters that we continue the tape group with the second part of it. And I think there are some 6 chapters left, and so that's great. We can continue this summer with say aspects and parts that are in the chapters that are so good to look at and to to support us in elevating our consciousness to great heights. And that's a lovely occurrence. So it's like the recognition of what is actually being shared is really what this is about. And you can feel that. You can, you're totally a part of it. So in your recognition of it, say it's almost like that makes this place, of this meeting place, you could say, one that lifts up in energy. And so that's why it's good to be totally receptive and, in fact, allow yourself to let yourself completely be affected by what you hear, and being willing, in fact, to start using what is being shared, not just considering it as ideas, but really going into that and say applying it and starting to consider it on a very deep level. Now, this is really what the tape group is for by now, because we know each other for a while. We have been studying this for a long time, and now the study part is like, okay, it's exemplifying. It's coming into the acceptance of it and seeing that you can actually apply this in all your affairs. That there's literally no exception to that. This is really great. So you first hear the ideas, you say like, well, that's wonderful, that's great to hear that. And slowly but certainly it comes to you as something that is actually true, in the true sense. And you who have accepted untrue ideas for yourself, misidentification, thinking that you're a human being walking on planet Earth, and see that starts to shift and start to fall apart. It's like there must be a different way to look at all of this. Now this is really what the tape group is for, and in this part 2 we definitely take a look at very deep processes, in fact, that are taking place in you, where you see, oh, that's why, or oh my God, can't believe it. Yes, that's so true. So whatever that is going to be. But one thing you will probably also recognize, and that's what we will see in the meditation today, is the idea of coming to a deep place inside yourself. Say, Joel uses the expression letter of truth, and letter of truth sounds pretty abstract, like the letter of truth, as if it has been written or something, like as if it is a law. And of course it is a law, but a law of freedom, you could say. But also there are no real words related to that. There are not really words that will confirm what it actually means. No, it really is an expression of an experience. And of course we mention this a lot, like I keep repeating that, because like, don't forget, these are not words that are being shared. No, this is not meditation to just be in like a positive cloud of ideas. No, this is actually an invitation to go so deep and become so open and receptive in yourself that something is going to occur. Like you have every opportunity to have such an incredible deep recognition that will reveal something to you that is like, well, this is the start of a new day. This is literally a new world opening up. So that is also with today's meditation, absolutely, where we're going to start with. since that is like, well, that is such a win-win situation. You quiet down your mind, you become still, you become receptive, and at the same time, it's like the only thing that's being asked of you is to give everything away, in fact. And so that's a lovely exercise to start with, followed by all everything that we do after that. Say, looking at parts of the book and of parts of the chapter, listening to Joel in a very specific tape, and yeah, see it from there. The ultimate of the correct letter of truth is when we go beyond using a word like God to where we are left with nothing but I, or I am. And that is enough. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because He has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. That is the mystical experience. If we are constantly and consciously, we are realizing that God is Spirit, and God is law, and therefore that law is spiritual. And if we are governed by spiritual law, that becomes the law, not only in this present moment, but this present moment goes on extending itself in time and space.
Le summum de la bonne lettre de vérité. Et lorsque nous allons au-delà de l'utilisation d'un mot comme Dieu et que nous nous retrouvons avec rien d'autre que je ou je suis. Et ça suffit. L'Esprit de Dieu est sur moi, parce qu'il m'a oint pour prêcher l'Évangile aux pauvres. Il m'a envoyé pour guérir les brisés des cœurs, pour prêcher la délivrance aux captifs et le recouvrement de la vue aux aveugles, pour remettre en liberté ceux qui sont meurtris. Luc 4, 18. C'est l'expérience mystique. Si constamment et consciemment nous réalisons que Dieu est esprit et que Dieu est loi, et que par conséquent cette loi est spirituelle, et si nous sommes gouvernés par la loi spirituelle, cela devient la loi, non seulement jusqu'à ce moment présent, mais ce moment présent va sur son extension dans le temps et dans l'espace.
Thank you. Thank you for joining in the meditation. And you see, the meditation was also a declaration. It's like, in order for you to let it become, so to speak, a mystical experience, this has to be a declaration, like what we shared in Luke. It's like it's a declaration. I'm anointed to preach, to the choir, to say, to heal the sick, and all this is like, that becomes a declaration. You start to feel that from within. You start to recognize that in yourself, and there's no have to or must do, but it's more like you can't stop that from becoming part of you. Now, this is interesting, of course, because in the meditation we talk about it it becomes an experience beyond just using the word God. It's like, now you're completely included in this. There's not God in you. Joel says this many times too, like, there's not God in you. They're not two different things. No, this is one thing, and it bubbles up from the inside, like it bubbles up from within you, coming into expression. And Joel says it here at the end of the meditation, into time and space. That's one thing, and also beyond it. It's like it's given, it's extended, and it goes everywhere. So, but like I said, it becomes a declaration of you, an inner recognition and declaration, in which you are going to actually allow this to be the truth for you. This is what I meant in the beginning with applying the teaching, not just hearing it and then considering it. No, this is the application of it. This is actually true. This is about nobody else but you. That's really great to take that step, and but it's like, it's not even you taking that step. It's more like you start to recognize that as an actual occurrence in you. But it's good to hear about it, otherwise you might just not even be aware that it's occurring, because that can happen too because it's a new step in your development, you could say. So some things take a while before they actually enter into your consciousness, so that you recognize, yes, that is happening in me. And of course, therefore, we are together here, and that's why we meet in the tape group and all kinds of possibilities to see where that is at for yourself. Like, how deep are you allowing yourself into that experience? How much are you willing to let go of in order to have a different experience of yourself? Now, the chapter, of course, in the book, in this book that we're using, is the title of is God is not mocked. So that's always an interesting expression. It comes from the Galatians, Galatians. So it's like this expression is very biblical. Now, it's interesting. We're going to read some of that too in Bible, directly from Bible, you could say, because Joel literally gives it in this chapter. But I use it, and so I use it to also say to come to a recognition, to come to a remembrance of, oh yeah, this is actually occurring. It's always bringing you to the edge of your consciousness. Like, are you aware of the fact that this is how that is, that God is one, and that like it is a total experience? It is not world and God, but no, this is God. So, and you could say you're the voice, you're the instrument that brings, say, the light into this world. Okay, God is not mocked. That's an interesting word, like ridiculed, laughed at. Like these are the words that in the dictionary are said to be mocked. Mocked is not taking seriously, laughed at, and all this. It's like God is not mocked. Be not deceived. See, this is the Galatians 6, 7 and 8. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he reap also. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Now that's great inspiration for your spiritual activities, of course. It's like, he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Okay, let's build this up a little bit, you could say. Let's build this up a little bit, because Joel uses in the chapters some more expressions related to the idea of reaping, sowing and reaping. So it's like cause and effect. But he has different expressions of it. I'll read it to you, because that is clarifying something here for us. Reaping the results tomorrow of our acts of today, or reaping the result of any of our former acts at a later time, is known in the Oriental teaching as karma. All right? We're familiar with that idea. And in philosophy as cause and effect. In the scriptural language, it is the law of whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. Now this is interesting. So this is applicable to everything, of course. Like cause and effect, you could say, are not apart. They're always related. So it's like whatever you give, you will receive. Whatever you invest in fact, you get the fruits from it. And the fruits can also be the illusions of it. You value something in vain, you could say, or something illusory, then you reap that too. You invest in fear, all kinds of delusional situations will show up. But like there's a cause and an effect. It's inevitable. It's like they belong together in the law of humanhood. And say sowing to the Spirit, you could say, how does that work then? Well, it's like if you put your value in, say, your relationship with your inner being, you get the result of that too. But if you're distracted and, say, invest in this world with your value system, you say like, well, no, I don't want to lose that. No, that's part of me. I need that. Then, of course, you get the result of that too. Now here's no exception to that. So bringing it back to the spiritual experience, you could say, this actually turns everything around. Because in your spiritual experience, how can you end up in life everlasting? Like, how could that be possible? If anything that I'm doing is always temporal, in my, say, limited perspective of myself, it is always limited. Now, how can that change and shift? And this is, in fact, the foundation of awakening. And that has everything to do with the change of cause and effect. Like, suddenly seeing that you are the effect of God. You are the instrument of God. You, like, literally are related completely to your source. God is the source. The I is the source. The I that I am is the source. There's no end, but God is the source. And it's flowing through you. You become the expression of it into this world, you could say, and beyond it, of course. So that's why this is, say, the spiritual part is then, well, recognizing what actually the source is and what the effect is. What is the cause? Like, I'm an effect of God. God is my cause. Otherwise I would not be here. There would be no way that I could be here. So God is my source. So this is good to know. So in the human perspective, on the other hand, in the human perspective, you always have opposites. You have cause and effect. Yeah, if you do that, this is the result. If you do that, that is the result. And actually, you place time between them. You think that you do something today and you get the result in a week. But in fact, the result is also immediately there. So you receive immediately the effect of how you are thinking. But you're so accustomed to time that you think it happens another time. In our awakening, and this is really important, is like in our awakening, in our transformation, these are coming together, like cause and effect come together. And where do they end up? How about right now? How about right now? So that's the occurrence. In fact, it's a collapse of time. It's like a cause and effect are not apart. They are being brought together in a whole moment, which is the present moment. That's why there's a link. It's like there's a link in your consciousness where an actual shift can occur. And this is exactly what this happens. It's like it happens in the present. We're practicing the presence for a reason. To bring together cause and effect. In fact, to allow it to shift into infinity. That's why that can be an infinite moment. That's why there's such thing as life everlasting. So the I is not limited by time at all. The I is not, say, wavering between cause and effect. No, the I is that what I am forever. Like it is the manifestation of eternity. So this is really deep spiritual teaching that Joel is actually sharing with us, and he uses the Galatians. It's great. It's like, yeah, cause and effect. What you do here, it has an effect. You say like, well, one glass of wine doesn't really matter. So you drink a glass of wine. But actually, you're tapping into a system, into a thought system, where this wine is also related to alcoholism. It's also related to accidents by using that. It's like, well, that's, you get the whole story. And you might not get it this time, or you might not get it, but it will come back to you in a certain way. It's like, that is really how this works. And there's no exception to it, like I said. So what we try to do as human beings is trying to stay in a comfortable zone in which you, say, cross out a lot of possibilities. Like, no, I don't like the effect of that. So I'm preparing myself, or I'm protecting myself really, to not let that happen. And we do that with great effort too. It's worth us a lot. So yeah, yeah, it is an endless cause and effect. Thinking about this glass of wine, so you get a headache. Okay, so you need an aspirin. You need a drugstore. You need a doctor, or who knows what. It's like from one thing comes the other, but it's all related. It's all one big cloud, in fact, of cause and effect that is interacting, and that seems to be putting us on a timeline, while actually by the cause we experience the effect already immediately. You know what you are doing. So here in the meditation, for instance, we said too, is like consciously and constantly recognizing the spirit is the only way to have life everlasting. It's like that's the only way to stay right here and not move an inch. And this is the practice of right now, the practice of the presence. See, and all this starts to make sense. And if you say like, well, I'm not going to be too serious about it, it's like, no. Well, you can do whatever you want, of course, but you cannot avoid taking part in the cause and effect relationships as you have, say, defined them in your human consciousness. Whether they are personal or not, you will have the effects within the cloud of denial that you take part in. But you can do that as long as you want, of course. So it's like, yeah, if you have experienced enough pain of the consequences of that specific part, or that unspecific part, that personal part or that totally impersonal part, I don't even care about that. You get the consequences and it hurts. So do you have enough, or are you trying to deal with the pain? Do you have enough? Do you have enough fear? Or are you still trusting your own ways instead of giving that up? Like, are you sowing to the spirit, or are you sowing cause and effect, the human effect, you could say? Now that's definitely a part of this, what Joel is sharing here. So God is not mocked. It's like you're doing this to yourself. God doesn't know about this at all. This is you in your dream, in your limited definition of yourself, having the time of your life, time especially of your life. You see? That makes total sense. Say, of course. Yeah. God is not mocked while we are sowing to the Spirit. No. Living the life of the Spirit in attunement or the at-one-ment with God, with our thoughts on the spiritual way of living, the spiritual pleasures of life, and the spiritual business and activity of life, then God is not mocked, and that those who sow to the Spirit reap spiritual treasure. The spiritual sense of life, which is the direct opposite of the human sense of life, is based on the premise that I and the Father are one. Yeah, so he is the cause, you're the effect. Like, I and my Father are one. God is your source. You're, say, created by that source, being a total part of it, being one with that. All that the Father has is ours, is yours, and therefore, indeed, instead of our having to demonstrate, get or achieve health, harmony, success, and wealth, we become that point in consciousness through which God manifests itself to the world. This is how we sow to the Spirit and reap the Spirit. So I and the Father are one. All that the Father has is ours. Like, that's inevitable. It's one thing. It's not a cause and effect. No, it's one thing. We become that point in consciousness through which God manifests itself to the world. And this is how we sow to the Spirit and reap the Spirit. So in some more Galatians. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness. Bear ye another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if a man think himself to be something, when he is nothing, he deceiveth himself. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if a man think of himself to be something, then he is nothing. When he is nothing, he deceiveth himself. So that sounds pretty mysterious, doesn't it? So when a man thinketh something of himself, you could say like the human definition, I'm this character, and I'm identified with the me that I think I am in this definition of myself. And I don't recognize myself as nothing, while I'm actually representing limited ideas that are not created by God, you could say. So it can never be true, in other words. But that's an interesting expression. So it's like when something happens, you stay with your brother. When something happens to your brother, you stay with your brother. Not to make this whatever happened real. No, in fact, for the solution, for offering the solution, the solace, for offering in fact, allowing that to be healed. Now, allowing that to be healed is also recognizing that there is no separation between you and your brother. Like, who is the one actually perceiving somebody at fault or somebody in trouble? Like, who is perceiving that? I am perceiving that. Okay, so I take responsibility for what I'm perceiving. I take responsibility for that and hand it over to spirit. Like, yeah, this is the new practice. Like, I'm like inspirited. I hand everything over to spirit. He leadeth my life. Like, he is giving that to me. I'm one with God, Spirit, Christ. That's my mind. See, it comes down to a declaration of that, but also a total acceptance of that. That is what I am. If I want to be myself, I have to recognize that I'm nothing by my own definitions. And seeing that, allowing that to fall apart, you could say, and dying into my own definitions of myself, allowing that what is real in me to emerge in my consciousness, to become whole, offering that everywhere, taking that with me, you could say, bringing that into this world, in every step, in every breath, you could say, in every step that you take. And that is your function. So it literally, your capacity to transform, to convert, to turn around, cause and effect into, say, expressing yourself as an effect of God, is where your healing capacity is. Like, not that that's something that you do. No, that happens by your recognition, by you allowing that change to occur within you. And that's so incredible. So like, that's so great to do that consciously and constantly. So you need constant reminders to do so. The time, oh yeah. So this was a great one too, that was in the book. The time has now come for you and for me and for everyone who has any awareness of truth to accept the responsibility of thinking in universal terms, of beginning to know that God is not mocked even on a national or international scale, and that the law of creation does operate, the law of God, wow, I said creation, that the law of God does operate universally. So the time has come now for you and for me and for everyone who has any awareness of truth to accept the responsibility of thinking in universal terms instead of personal terms or in limited terms. No, now it's universal terms. And that thinking is something you do with God, of beginning to know God, that God is not mocked even on a national or international scale, and that the law of God does operate universally. And the law of God is the law of love. So in fact, it is the recognition that loving God with all of my heart, with all of my soul, all of my mind, and all of my spirit. That's the basic law of God. Like it's a law of love, and loving my brother as myself. And that is an action of mind. It's an action of giving, you could say. It's an action of mind, just like I said. It's like, it's not necessarily that you have to do something. You don't have to set up a welfare or some kind of aid system or who knows what. Like, you never know. But now the action of mind is where this starts. Like, it asks for an action of giving, an action of mind. And going to spirit, going to love God first, going to, in fact, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness before you do anything, before you respond to a certain situation. First come into that deeply. Like that, that's where everything changes. So entering into a new world, this is the portal to that. To become still, to stay right here, and not doing anything before you make contact with your inner being, so that you're not responding to a cause and effect relationship, but in fact allow yourself to sink so deep inside yourself that everything already completely changed. Now that's a real possibility, and that's the practice. So Joel practiced this absolutely. So that's why it's amazing. Like, you see what happens. You will hear that in the talk too in a moment. Like, you hear in the talk too that he's in fact giving that constantly bringing that in. No self-interest, no ideas about himself necessarily. No, in fact, allowing himself to be an instrument and allowing himself to radiate this certainty that he has developed by receiving it, by receiving experiences of the Spirit, by revelation, sending that, giving that to you, radiating that in his presence, like this.
There is a point that you find the world itself, the world of men and women, do not grasp, and which, if our students do not grasp, is going to account for years and years of frustration, of delay in the demonstration of harmony that they expect to make through their studies. Probably it is because we have misinterpreted Scripture so badly that we lack the ability to come out of the mesmerism that religion has thrown us into. I'm going to illustrate that with 2 points that came up on this recent trip, on this latest trip. The speaker opening this international conference in Holland quoted a passage from St. Augustine. in which he said that God cares for everything, every bird, every person, everything in the world. And I knew that if that statement were allowed to stand, that I would have no contribution whatsoever to make to that meeting, because what I had to say would be a contradiction of that statement, the way the statement reads and is usually understood. And so I started right off when I was introduced to say that while the statement of St. Augustine was true probably from the standpoint from which he said it, it was definitely not true from the way the world interprets it. In other words, if there is anybody at all that still believes that God concerns himself with this human world, they are certainly shutting their eyes to the wars, to the diseases, to man's inhumanity to man that is witnessed in every part of the globe, the cruelties, not merely that are inflicted upon animals or birds, but the cruelties that are inflicted on man by man and by cruel systems of government. If anyone for a moment believes that God is caring for those who are so badly wounded and mangled at war or on the high roads of our nation, they must certainly have a strange idea of what care means. If the infinite way has revealed anything to me at all, it is that there is no God in the human scene, and that a human being is as stupid to rely on God as he would be to rely on a six-pointed star, a crucifix, or a sword, and whatnot. I called attention to the fact in this same talk that a man who in his field of medicine is one of America's great names, and to whom if we would go and say, I have discovered a cure for cancer, won't you try it out? Try it on 100,000 cases and tell me if I haven't got a good cure for cancer. And then if he and his associates tried it out and 15 cases were healed out of the 100,000, I'm sure that that man would come back and say, you haven't got a cure. I know 15 cases were healed, but I don't understand how they were healed, but certainly not by your medicine, because there's 99,985 who didn't get healed, and that's the story. But this man, imbued with religious enthusiasm, goes to Lourdes, and he witnesses 100,000 people go to the shrine, all of them praying to the same God, the same prayers, the same shrine, probably with equal desire to be healed. And out of this 100,000 who go there, 15 of them were healed. And then this man writes a book to show that those 15 healings proved that God heals disease. To him, the 99,985, he was blind to those. What happened to those were of no importance to him. 15 people were healed, and that proved that God healed disease, and that's utter nonsense. That isn't the way God would work. to heal 15 people and leave these others unhealed, all praying equally? No, no. No, when you have witnessed not only what I've witnessed in my 50 years of travel, but what anyone can witness by going to a public library and reading history, you have to acknowledge that God was very absent from this scene, and still is. Then you find, first of all, that this does not destroy your faith in God. Nothing can do that, because there doesn't live on this earth an individual, even among those who call themselves atheists, there doesn't live one single individual who inside of his own being doesn't know that there is a God, that doesn't know that there is a creative principle of this universe, that it did not create itself, and that it cannot accidentally keep roses coming from rose bushes forever. It cannot accidentally keep the tides in their place forever, or the sun and moon and stars in their courses. There must be law, there must be a principle, there must be something that governs as well as creates the universe. And so this does not destroy your faith in God, but it makes you question. Since, looking around at this human scene, we see so little evidence of God, so little evidence of what Jesus said, "It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of these things." We have so little evidence when you look around this world of God knowing humanity's need, and still less of God's good pleasure in giving it, that the question that arises is not, is there a God or isn't there, but how have we missed the way of finding God? How have we missed the way of bringing God into our experience and proving that God can heal disease the same as God healed disease 2,000 years ago, or that men like Jesus and many other mystics saw that it is God's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, saw that God does know our need. So the question then comes, how have we lost our way, and can we get back on the path that will bring God into our experience as a tangible reality? Well, of course, Jesus knew this because he made it very clear that there is something necessary on our part before we can receive, let us call it the grace of God. That is, life lived without taking thought, anxious thought, doubtful thought, concern, worry, fear. Repent, turn ye and live. You cannot add new wine to old bottles. Paul saw it very clearly and taught it in language that is probably easier for us to understand when he made it clear that we must die daily to the old man, that we must put off mortality in order to put on immortality, both Paul and Jesus left pretty good formulas as to how to attain that, although many of them are called impractical today. But certainly those who live by them do not find them impractical. It is only those who have never tried it who find it impractical. The same people that never drove an automobile that knew it couldn't be done, and those who couldn't fly an airplane knew that couldn't be done. It is always the ones who have never tried it who are so sure that it can't be done. You never find those who have tried it claiming that it can't be done. So, in my experience, which has led to the teachings that are in the Infinite Way writings, the point that clarified itself to me was this, that as long as you continue to live as a human being, that you must reap a human life. And a human life is one of ups and downs, good and bad, sick and well, alive and dead, rich and poor, sometimes one and sometimes the other. That it is only when some form of purification has taken place within us that we can begin to demonstrate the absolute truth, not only that there is a God, but that this God knoweth our needs before we do, and it is His good pleasure, or its, to give us the kingdom, to make our way harmonious. In the Sermon on the Mount, you have these two paths clearly defined. On the one hand, ye have heard it said of old. That's the old Hebraic law. That is the teaching of all churches today. The old Hebraic law. Every church lives by the Old Testament. No church accepts the New. All live by the old law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and if somebody steals your coat, lock him up and put him in jail. He deserves it. Just be sure he stays there long enough until he'll come out so angry that he'll want to steal two coats. All of human existence today is lived in accord with the Old Testament, the law. And the Master, on the other hand, said, "But I say unto you," and then he gave the Christian way of life. Now it is that Christian way of life that we are told today is impractical and impossible, but which needs only to be tried in order to be proved. Put up thy sword. And here we have one of these first principles that the world denies today. It denies that you can put up your sword. Of course, what it really means is this. The human world can't put up its sword, and of course it can't. How can it when it has nothing greater than the sword to turn to? The world knows only force, physical force, and nowadays they're commencing to learn the power of mental force. This is a rather new experience within this century. Originally, men fought probably with their fists or threw stones at each other. But as soon as the bow and arrow was invented, it was a very easy thing to defeat the people who had only their fists or stones. And when rifles were invented, it was an easy thing to defeat the nations that had only bows and arrows. And so it has been that every invention in the line of physical force has made it possible for the one with the strongest power, the heaviest power, to defeat the one that had the lesser power. And we go all the way through that until we come up to this present moment when we have nuclear fission. And the only sad part is that the enemy has two. And so instead of it being a very simple thing to win our victories by throwing a few more of those bombs, now we have to hold back because the other fellow may throw them too. And so we come to a period of government by fear. We come to a period now when every national and international policy is based on fear. Nothing less. Shall we go into the Middle East? If we don't, we fear the Russians will. If we do, we fear the Russians will do something else. If it isn't the Russians, it's the Chinese, and if it isn't them, it's somebody else. But the point is that all policies in the human world today are being predicated on fear. We do what we fear that we must do, or what we fear not to do. This cannot be changed in the human picture. That is why it is an easy thing, and probably a truthful one, for the human being, knowing of no power but material force, to say, well, there is no other way. Those are the only weapons we have, weapons of force. And therefore, we must have more force than the other fellow. Now, when the Master said, put up thy sword, he did not mean put up thy sword so that your enemy can cut your head off. He meant put up your sword because he was teaching that which would destroy the power of material force. In this present century, or late in the last, we saw the beginning of mental sciences. And we saw that the power of mind was actually sufficient to change conditions of body. That the power of mind was actually sufficient to change conditions of living. It was through this that the mind sciences began, even that which is today called the science of right thinking, the power of thought. Through that, the works evolved into the higher realm, where even the power of thought was done away with, and the higher realm was entered of no thought and no power. That's the realm in which we're working in the infinite way. We are not working through the power of the mind. We are not working through the power of right thinking. We are not working through the power of thought. We are working in the realm of no mind, no thought, no power. And that doesn't mean quite what it seems, because it is in the realm of an infinite power, but a power not used by man, not directed by man, not influenced by man. And that, of course, is where the difficulty comes in understanding and applying the principles of the infinite way, because in our first undertaking of this work, we find it absolutely necessary to change our way of thinking. We have to change our way of thinking from believing that there is power in thing or thought to the realization of this X-power, God, Spirit. We have to change our way of thinking from believing that I of my own self can do something physically or mentally, and come into the realization that I of my own self can do nothing. And then not make a liar of myself by trying to do something, but by actually abiding in that consciousness where that which has been called the Father within by the Master, that which was called the Christ by Paul, this that is unknown to the human world comes into active operation. So it is that in our earliest work in this work, it would seem that we are very busy using our mind, and we are. We're using our mind just as we would pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. It is very much like priming the pump. We use our mind because as we read, we become aware of principles that are foreign to us. Those of us who were living under the law of the Old Testament, we find that we are learning about principles of put up thy sword. If the left cheek is struck, turn the right. If our coat is taken, give our vest. We're learning of new principles which are so alien to us that it takes a good bit of mental disciplining before we can even bring ourselves to accept them, much more try to demonstrate them. So there is a stage in our unfoldment when we are very definitely using the mind in order to help us outgrow it. But when we come to the practical living and the demonstration of the infinite way, that is when you come to the place where you put up your sword, not only the physical sword, but the mental sword, and find what this other power is. I told you yesterday of the tremendous change that has come into the world as evidenced by the public statement made by the Church of England, officially over its signature, in which it said, and this was printed in every newspaper in England, Ireland, and Scotland, and Wales, that Christian Science has awakened us to our responsibilities in this age. They only meant one thing by that, because they later explained that they were not agreeing with Christian Science theology. They weren't even agreeing with the Christian Science principles of healing. But they had been awakened to their responsibility of making spiritual power practical in human affairs through healing and through the other activities of daily life. This statement in itself is a world-shattering statement because it completely shattered the old world of theology and opened up a whole new era in which everyone must ask themselves, what are the religious responsibilities in this age? Because it concerns not merely the church, it concerns everyone interested in the subject of living a religious life and yet having it made tangible in one's daily experience. Now, it is very clear in traveling this world that business organizations, medical organizations, church organizations are all opening themselves and inviting into themselves speakers, lecturers, teachers on these subjects. And that means this, that just as there have been transitional periods in history before, like the period when we went from Judaism to Christianity, to the teaching of the Master, periods when we went from the Roman and Greek culture to the European, periods when the Oriental culture was at its very, very zenith, and then dropped, periods such as we had a couple of 100 years ago when man began reaching out for freedom, liberty, and quickly came the English Charter, the French Revolution, the American Revolution. These were periods. These were not isolated instances. These were periods, transitional periods, when men passed from one dispensation to another. So it is that we are right now in the midst of such a transitional period when men are moving out from the era of force to the era of that which transcends the use of force.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. And apparently we're still in that phase with humanhood. It's like trying to let go of the idea of force in the world. You know, it's like he's expressing this in this way, and it seems like we're still in the same phase. And that didn't really change, did it? So it's like, well, here you are. This is your world. Now, what are you going to do? Accepting this for yourself, starting to apply it in your affairs, being the example of that. Great. That's the only speed up that is in fact asked. So that's really lovely to see that that Joel is in fact offering that. So this was a great tape related to the chapter, because what we discovering here is in fact coming to the core of it, coming to applying the teachings, applying the principles of the infinite way experience. The infinite way is an experience, is your experience of your totality, and learning the principles and allowing a change of mind to occur, to in fact see that the mind in itself as a human say cause and effect relationship thing is not useful any longer in the sense of directing or in the sense of navigating in your life. So to give that up needs some preparation, needs some exercise, it takes some time to come to that, to allow that to be totally true for you. And that time is there. Like that's the time that we're filling right now. It's like this is used for that change, to consider the change, to discover what it will bring, to allow that change in the situation that comes to you, doing it in a different way. So that is the new world that we're talking about. Now, I don't know about your experience, but we just entered into a totally new world. Do you recognize that? It's like whatever is going on, this is brand new. This never happened before. So that's really good to know. Don't think that nothing changed. No, you have changed sufficiently to say come to the application of what is being shared. If you think that everything is just continuing the same way as it did before, you will have the experience of that too. Like, that is by your choice then, but you can really allow yourself to see the changes that have occurred in you. So that's really lovely. I find myself in a completely new world. I've no reference. I've no possibility of referencing back to something that happened before. No, I just feel it's brand new. It's a new world, and it's happening right now. So thank you for being part of that and practicing with me. That's very delightful, so great. And so I'm going to play some music, and we relax a little bit in this, what is given to us today. And thank you for everything. So the next meeting to come up with that, the next meeting is in 2 weeks. There's one break weekend, you could say, and but then we continue with the next chapter. I can look it up what it is. The next chapter will be, and we prepare that, of course, as Emmanuel, God with us, Emmanuel. So that's a lovely one too. And so thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.